This is feedback for question 4. How has research and planning been used? Sorry, how has technology been used in your research and planning, construction and evaluation stages? Okay, so what would be good practice is to have an introduction here, just a couple of sentences. You can use the same kind of introduction from your essay on skills, where we talked about digital technology. So, how has digital technology played a big part in the creativity, which is what they've talked about here. So again, there's a lot of overlap here between the exam and what you're doing for your evaluation at this stage. So let's have like a kind of nice opening there. Good. Okay, so we've talked about what it is, we've talked about how we've used it, which is really good. That's nice. You've got some screenshots of what's going on. What you could do is maybe make them into rolling presentations just to make it a little bit more interactive. Good. You've talked about your Weebly. You talked about how you've sectioned it off. That's nice. What you could talk about here is how you've made it more presentable, a more creative way of doing your folder for assessment, because obviously you get marked on the use of ICT and creativity in this section. The other thing you could talk about is, of course, it kind of comes across as being like the website for your film itself. Okay, this is good. So now we're talking about presentation softwares. This is good. So we've got some examples. So you can do this, or the other thing you could do is just re-embed the files. So you've got your thing links in there. This is good. So again, what you could talk about is this makes it a bit more interactive. That's nice. Yep. Okay. You could talk about here how you've used the blood splatter effect to kind of maintain some sort of branding or some sort of kind of relevance to the brief that you're making. Okay, so I think we could do a lot more with SurveyMonkey here. Again, if I show you the exemplar on here, where they've talked about SurveyMonkey. So this is quite important in terms of things like, actually they didn't put much on there, but you can talk about here about how there are different ways of collecting it. Also the fact that it gave you grids and graphs and stuff like that. You could show them clips of the surveys that you've done. So there's that colour scheme one that looks quite attractive to put on there as a demonstration. This was just on obviously the first bit where we talked about which pitch you like the most, but I think you can go into more detail here about how it gave you grids and graphs, made it very easy to read the feedback from your audience, and also because it's a SurveyMonkey, you could put that onto social networks. So again, it might be useful just to get some of those pages where you posted it initially onto Facebook or however else you connected with your target audience, and just elaborate on that, because like one sentence is probably not going to be enough there. The font is good. Yep, that's good. Okay, so with YouTube, you've talked about how you've done the practice trailer. That's good. Yep, so this could be a lot more in depth here, talking about things like these guys did, where you talk about how you've used it to see that there's they talked about WhatsApp there as well, and Twitter, and this is the stuff we kind of want to see as well. Yeah. So yeah, you could talk about how you use YouTube to get your videos of your makeup tutorials. That's important. Also, how you use YouTube to upload your planning stuff. So we've got the camera guide video. You went out you did the high angles and the low angles and all that stuff. That was part of the research and planning. So that's probably another additional thing that could be spoken about there. Okay, so this is good. We've got some actual examples of you using those tools. Yep. Okay. Okay, that's good. Be good if we had some examples of actually you using them on the video, but fair enough. So again, we're talking about the AS course here. We don't need to talk about AS at all. So if you haven't used InDesign, don't talk about it. This is just in the research and planning of this thing. So all of this stuff here is going to be irrelevant. We wouldn't carry any marks, so get rid of that bit. Again, we're talking about imagery of your AS music magazine. None of this in the exemplars is about music magazines. It's all about the horror. So keep it focused on the project you're doing right now, which is horror. Okay, it's not the essay. It's an evaluation. It's a separate thing. So I think we need a bit more in this because you've used Photoshop a lot more heavily than just this to make your posters. We've got things like layer blends. So I'd like to see the evidence of what that looked like. So get the actual files up of where you did this stuff, and turn the layers on and off to show me like the kind of different stages of construction that you've used it for. Okay. Other stuff you could talk about here, so like they've done here, look, they've actually shown me like the different layers, and they've turned some on and off to show me the different stuff that's going on, so that needs to be a bit more detailed. Plus the fact, obviously, we need to see the final products that you're talking about, because you would have used InDesign to lay out your page for your magazine, so that should be what's spoken about here, not the music magazine. So I guess here it's just more examples. Without examples, we can't give you the C grade. There's also, you've only really spoken about a couple of bits, and you've used Photoshop a lot more, so this needs a hell of a lot more detail to get the higher grades. Okay, again, I've got no examples. Final Cut, I've got that, but you know what I don't have is any of the timelines, any of the effects you've used. So again, really, it's just about the examples just aren't there. So look, I've got that from the other group, and all this where they've talked about how they've used Logic to then sync it to that. You know, you haven't even spoken about transitions here. So that's really important. That needs a lot more in that section. Again, here, this whole section, to be honest, is quite brief, and I think that's the problem. This whole section. So I think we're probably looking at really here like a kind of V for this section. It doesn't really say a great deal. There's very few examples to give you a C for, and you know the amount of tools that you've used in Final Cut, like the blade and the transitions, and show me how you did the montage, and talking about how the music scores to it. You know, all these things I'm saying to you now need to be addressed if you want a higher grade. But this section here will bring it down quite a lot. Camera, again, we haven't really talked about angles, or we haven't talked about the use of different ways that you can control the focus or the exposure, or again all the stuff that we did on the shoot. So here, you know, we've got pictures of them actually taking the photos. We should have some set photos of you doing this stuff. You know, we've got all this stuff here. What I've talked about using the ISO, all this stuff here about the quality of it. So this, you know, this in itself, again, very kind of quick. E grade would have taken like 3 seconds to write that. Evaluation, this is good. It will need updating, of course, but this is yep, this is good. Yep. Okay. Oh, I see. Yeah. So I think when it's talking about this section, it's talking about how you've built your evaluation. So it's about the different technologies you've used. So again, because you know, we've got some screen grabs here and stuff like that, which is good. But the main one that you're using at the moment is kind of Weebly. You know, we haven't got any GIFs at the minute of seeing like a kind of rotation of this stuff happening. So I think that's kind of why we're struggling here. We're sort of referring back to research. So I mean, that does make sense what you've said here about having side-by-sides, but I'd kind of need to see where you've screenshotted that from the actual evaluation questions itself. This is good. We've talked about that. That's nice. Yeah, that's good. So you've talked about how you've collected the evidence for your evaluation section. Yep. So what I'd like to see here is the kind of, I like the GIFs by the way. What I'd like to see here is the kind of examples of the feedback that you collected for question 3. So again, you might need to return to this section just to add more to it. And of course, all the stuff you're making now for question 2, which is the like the Lego game and the CD cover and all that sort of stuff, that would go in this section too. So you'll just need to go back and update it. So obviously this bit's incomplete, but we knew that was going to happen because you're still making the evaluation. This bit is a section that I've really got concerns about. It's very, very brief, very unspecific, with very limited examples. This section definitely needs looking at quite strongly, and we still need a conclusion as well for each section about how important it was. Overall, I'd say at the moment, probably kind of looking at the sort of around the, probably kind of looking again at the sort of D, sort of, yeah, I kind of say D, maybe even D minus. It's quite basic overall. First section is stronger, probably working towards a sort of C plus, maybe even a B, but this section is dragging it right down. And then obviously this section will need to be updated later on. Thanks very much.